It has been a while since I have taken a look at the new garden system Juan and I worked on this winter for my mom. I'll link throughout this video to a few past videos that show the whole build. Very, very brief update or context that we're looking at here. There are 4, 5, 6 beds here. They are each 4 feet by 8 feet. It's cost us about $30 or $40 to build. We're using live edge or scrap wood black locust lumber for the framing. These are Hugel mounds. There's logs and debris in there. Like I said, if you want to see more details, including how we put it all together, there are those past videos. I'll link them in the description. So here we are at the end of the first growing season, and how did it work? I'd say overall, this was a really lovely success. The amount of growth, the amount of food we were able to get out of this space was pretty darn nice, considering that was the very first year with straight up raw logs and pond soil and all sorts of mixed soil. We did not fill them with perfect potting mix by any stretch or aged compost. There's a lot of rotten leaves and wood chips and manures and all sorts of stuff buried down in there around the logs. So to that end, it's amazing how well things worked, and also the fact that it received almost no real maintenance. I just did a little bit of cleanup here. Actually, Juan and I went through and we cut back the golden giant amaranth. That was probably a design mistake as far as how they filled the space. You can see the stalks here, but basically made it nearly impossible to walk through a few of the beds. They were fine. They were like a good first year filler crop. I think we'd like to curate the space and make it a lot more thoughtful and detailed moving forward. But the amaranth grew well. Juan got probably a solid quart of seed to bring home, and so now we can clear that up and set it in motion in another direction. Something that grew pretty well were the tomatoes. This is the northernmost bed. A couple things that we did very wrong here. Number one was the lack of any real trellising early on. It was kind of an afterthought to stick in this ring, but the tomatoes grew extremely fast. At the end of the season here, they look a bit haggard from late blight. That's kind of normal. I also didn't really pinch or manage or do anything like that. And so, but that being said, we still got a lot of tomatoes out of here. My mom just picked another nice bucket of these cherry tomatoes. I did a trial where mid-season I stuck in some bamboo and laid them up against this chestnut tree in the hopes that the tomato would find that and climb its way up and just become this beautiful trellised tomato thing. It kind of worked a little on this one. You can see some nice droopers here hanging out, but the issue with the bamboo, lots and lots of little lateral spikes, kind of not great for the eyes. So I think we will retire the bamboo as a trellis for next year and do something more like this, where we use black locust staves that are pounded into the earth on the north side of the bed. And then my mom would like to see wooden weavers. So probably use hazelnut or some sort of wood that we screw in, some thicker ones, and then weave around through there. We'll look at that next year when we evolve that, but we'll plan to make a set of wooden uprights on the north with a nice flat plane of wood. And then if there are going to be tomatoes or beans or cucumbers, some other climbing crop, to be a bit more deliberate early on in getting them onto that scaffold, tied in, and do the proper management so that they're fruitful but also feel nice to be around. I think the untamed wild tomato vibe with random spiky bamboo was fun and not to be repeated. Some real winners here. This is a bed that was set in motion early on with mainly perennial vegetables, which tend to be a pretty winning way to go. There is Korean celery here. This was dormant during the heat of the summer, but now is coming back and looking beautiful. Lots and lots of greens here. It's a really mild, almost parsley-like perennial green. Deep, deep taproot. The Good King Henry is phenomenal. We put in these decent-sized plugs in the spring, and you can see here where we've cut them back really hard. They're getting new growth. We were able to collect some seed, and we made many, many lunches with greens provided from the Good King Henry. There's about 8 in here. Really nice spacing. I could imagine filling a whole bed with these and being pretty happy about it. And then the perennial arugula on the north of this bed, pretty nice job. It's a spicier version of arugula, so we didn't eat as much as we could, but we'll cut them back hard relatively soon and let them green up for the fall and enjoy them then. parsley on the boundary, looking pretty happy. It feels like those plants that have a nice tap-rooted feel to their growth habit did the absolute best in here. I think their roots went down nice and deep. They had access to very, very good, even amounts of moisture down in the soil. We haven't watered anything in here once. We had a pretty rainy summer, but there were some dry spells in there too. It was just a lot of organic matter, a fair bit of mulch, and really dense planting. We watered things when they first went in, and then that was it. So since May, this has had no watering from us. So it's really nice amount of growth considering. Some simple beds of beets in here. I think we should thin them relatively soon. But there's some nice chonkers in there growing, doing their thing. Lots of winnowed amaranth all over them, so I'm sure amaranth will be happy to volunteer in here. We're comfortable right now being a little loose with how seeds and weeds are growing because we plan on filling these with more compost later on anyway. Sometime over the winter we'll fill them in. Likewise, on that note, the walkways look like a mess right now because they are acting as a place to receive the weeds and the leftover crops. You can see that after we process the amaranth, we're just throwing it in the walkway for now. We'll let them rot down for a bit. Sometime this fall, we'll cover all of this with some leaves to pin them down and remove some weeds, fertilize the walkways, feed the whole system. Right now, it's kind of like a trash bin. It's a short commute to pull weeds and throw them in the walkway, and we'll cover them later. One little issue that showed up this year, well, not a little, I guess it depends on your level of allergies, but right in here, boop, I won't put my finger in there, but you'll see them come and go. This is a ground wasp nest, ground hornets, that showed up earlier in the season. We have skunks that live in the woods here, and when there are ground wasps that show up, you can see there's one. Not a hugely active nest. It's starting to wind down here in the fall, but that's something to be aware of. I think the dry pockets, dried wood that was deep in there, I think made for a decent habitat for them. And so this end of the bed we've left alone. I'm not going to rip it open. I'm not going to spray. I'm not going to kill them. They're going to live there until the fall. That nest will certainly die over winter. Probably things will settle and they won't come back in next year. But that's something to be aware of if we set up a Hugelmound bed and there's really dry pockets within there. It could be habitat for wasps. It's the only one that I saw, but just something to be aware of. Flowers did pretty well. Lots of zinnias to harvest. A couple zinnias to clean up. Should come out here with some pruners. But fair bit of nice flowers here. We got some starts from a local nursery for some nice annual flowers. They're really happy in here. There's also an ornamental salvia over there, that nice red. So it's kind of nice having the flowers. I think in the future what we should do is plan for these taller flowers to be in the middle of the bed. It's a little bit wide of a bed to make it easy for my mom, or it's harder for my mom to reach into the middle. So having more beautiful flowers that don't need to be interacted with as much might make more sense, and then we can focus on things like salad, greens, parsley, cilantro, cut and come again, kale, spinach on the edges. So it's very easy to walk through, but we're going to wait till we're done with the season, get all this stuff, all the weeds done, all the grasses, the debris in the walkways, and then cover that with leaves, let it settle for the winter, and then more thoughtfully design these beds for next year. But for a trial run, I'm very, very pleased with how well things grew in here. Now that we've pulled the amaranth, we're going to also pull these tomatoes after one more round of harvest, not too long from now. And I think there's still a window here to transplant in some actively growing lettuces and kale seedlings from our other spot. You can see the soil is really, really healthy in here. It's growing nicely. And so we'll transplant those in, soak them really thoroughly to get them established. And then that holds the option as we get into mid-October and things start to really cool down. We can put in 1/2-inch EMT conduit hoops. Since these are 4-foot beds, we can slide those in 1, 2, 3 and hold the option of putting some season extension over these so my mom can have fresh greens for the winter. That's the update for this garden evolution for this season. Overall, really pleased. Something to be aware of was the wasps possibly setting up shop. Some real winners were the perennial vegetables. Some less winners were the tomatoes without any management. That's not their fault. They were sprawling and we didn't support them. The flowers will migrate towards the middle or be a dedicated bed. So some design improvements to be had. But overall for $5 or $6 per bed in wood. There's no metal fasteners. There's no real measuring tape or any of that kind of stuff. Pretty much entirely free organic matter in the form of logs from the woods and debris and soil from the landscape and free shredded leaves that we harvested from the municipality. It's a pretty solid pathway to erase a lawn and create some permanent raised bed production, and it's very, very reasonably priced. So hopefully there's some ideas and inspiration there. Let me know in the comments, do you have some questions about what you're seeing here? Do you have some thoughts about how we can evolve this or things you'd like to see next year? How are your gardens growing? How are your new developments in gardening evolving? Let us know. Thanks for watching.
Show you the bucket?
Sure. Hey, all right. That one tomato looks a little underripe, that big green one.
Yeah, well, I couldn't maybe leave it in the sun.
Yeah, leave it in the sun. What do you think about these bamboos?
Out of my way.
Poking you right in the eye.
Yep.
That's an upgrade for next year.
Yeah. It worked a little bit up to a point. I'm afraid to go in there because the bees were getting mad at the other bees.
B versus B.
Yep. See? Mr. and Mrs. Slug have been feasting over here.
Yeah, it's an upgrade needed for next year is better trellising and ease for tomato harvest, as demonstrated.